I only paid his fare because the line was restless, and I just wanted to go home. It was a $3 ticket, a meaningless kindness on a Tuesday evening, but the old man didn't say thank you. He leaned in close, smelling of stale tobacco and fear, and whispered a warning that turned my blood to ice. He said they were filing me out of my own life, and that I had until Friday to find out why. The fluorescent lights of the Ridgeway Transit Center hummed with a sound that felt like a migraine trying to break through my skull. It was 7 in the evening on a Tuesday in November, and the air inside the terminal smelled of wet wool, diesel fumes, and the specific, sour anxiety of people who were late for somewhere they did not want to be. I stood near the ticket kiosks, shifting my weight from one heel to the other, gripping the strap of my laptop bag until my knuckles turned white. My reflection in the dark glass of the sliding doors looked tired. At 33, I usually prided myself on looking put together. Crisp blouses, hair pulled back tight, the face of a woman who managed risk for a living. But tonight, I looked frayed. The hem of my coat was damp from the slush outside, and my eyes had the hollow, bruised look of someone who had spent 8 hours staring at a screen, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Earlier that afternoon, my manager at Marrowline Systems had placed a document on his desk and slid it toward me with the apologetic grimace of a man who was just following orders. Performance Improvement Plan. The words were bold and centered. They called it a PIP. I knew what it really was. It was the corporate pre-mortem. It was the paper trail they built before they walked you to the elevator with a cardboard box. I had spent the last 4 hours trying to analyze the data they had used to justify it. But the numbers did not add up. I was a compliance analyst. Finding errors was my job. And yet, when I pointed out the discrepancies in their report, my manager had just tapped the paper and told me we could discuss the details later. Now, I just wanted to get on the bus, go back to my apartment, and stare at the ceiling until sleep came. The line for the automated kiosk was moving slowly. In front of me, an elderly man in a faded gray windbreaker was struggling with the touchscreen. He was small, with thin shoulders and white hair that stuck up in tufts. As if he had run his hands through it repeatedly in frustration, he inserted a debit card into the slot, waited, and then stared at the screen as it flashed red. He pulled the card out, wiped the magnetic strip on his sleeve, and tried again. Behind me, a woman in a heavy parka sighed loud enough to be heard over the announcement system. Someone else checked their watch and muttered about the schedule. The old man's shoulders hiked up toward his ears. I could see the tremor in his hands. He tried the card a third time. The machine beeped a harsh, flat rejection tone. Declined. He stood there, frozen, staring at the word like it was a foreign language. He patted his pockets, looking for cash, but came up empty. He looked terrifyingly small against the cold, industrial gray of the station. I did not think about it. I just wanted the line to move, and I hated the way the woman behind me was tapping her foot. I stepped forward and tapped the old man on the shoulder. "Excuse me," I said. My voice sounded loud in the sudden silence of the queue. "Let me get it." He turned around slowly. His face was lined with the map of a hard life, his eyes watery and pale blue. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and profound embarrassment. "No, miss," he said, his voice raspy. "I have the funds. It is just the chip. The chip is worn. It is okay," I said. I pulled my own card from my pocket and slotted it into the reader before he could protest. I selected a one-way fare. It was $3.50, a meaningless amount. The machine whirred and spat out a paper ticket. I handed it to him. "Go ahead," I said, forcing a tight smile. "It is cold out there. You do not want to miss the bus." The people behind us relaxed, their collective impatience dissolving now that the obstacle was removed. I expected the man to nod, maybe mutter a thank you, and hurry toward the bays. He did not move. He took the ticket, but his eyes stayed locked on my face. He studied me with an intensity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was not the look of a stranger receiving charity. It was the look of someone trying to solve a puzzle. He looked at my forehead. my chin, the way I held my bag. Then he took a step closer. The smell of him hit me then. Stale tobacco, peppermint, and old paper. He invaded my personal space, leaning in until his face was inches from mine. I instinctively recoiled, stepping back, but he matched my movement. "They are filing you out of your own life," he whispered. The words were so soft I almost missed them, but the clarity of his diction was razor sharp. I froze. "Excuse me? Check your name before Friday," he hissed. He reached out and pressed something into my palm. It was not the ticket I had just bought him. It was a crumpled piece of thermal receipt paper, folded into a tight square. Before I could ask him what he meant, before I could ask if he was confused or sick, he turned and walked away. He did not go toward the bus bays. He walked straight for the exit doors, pushing through them and disappearing into the rainy night without looking back once. I stood there for a moment, my heart doing a strange double beat. The woman behind me cleared her throat. "Are you using the machine or not?" she asked. I blinked, snapping back to the present. I bought my ticket with shaking fingers and walked toward the waiting area. I sat on one of the hard plastic benches and unfolded the piece of paper the man had given me. It was a receipt from a convenience store, dated 2 days ago. On the back, written in shaky blue ballpoint ink, was a time, 8:15, and a number, Locker 17C. My first reaction was the one my father had taught me, rational skepticism. It was a scam, or he was suffering from dementia. Cities were full of people whose minds had started to fray, people who saw conspiracies in license plates and hidden messages in billboards. He had probably mistaken me for a granddaughter, or a ghost from his past. I crumpled the receipt and shoved it into my coat pocket. I needed to focus on reality. I needed to focus on the PIP, on the fact that my rent was due in 10 days, and on the terrifying possibility that I was losing my touch at work. But as the bus rumbled out of the station and merged onto the highway, the whisper played on a loop in my head. "They are filing you out of your own life." It was such a specific, bureaucratic turn of phrase. A crazy person usually warned you about demons, or government satellites, or poison in the water. They did not warn you about filing. I stared out the window at the blurred lights of Hollowbrook passing by. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I remembered Tuesday morning. I had received a notification on my phone from my bank. Direct deposit failed. Verification error. I had called payroll immediately. The administrator, a woman named Sharon, who usually had a joke for every occasion, had been short with me. She said it was a system glitch, a batch error that affected 20 people. She promised it would be reprocessed by Thursday. I had believed her. Why wouldn't I? Systems failed. Glitches happened. But now, staring at my reflection in the dark bus window, I wondered why Sharon had sounded so nervous. The next morning, the atmosphere at Maroline Systems felt brittle. The office was a landscape of gray cubicles and glass walls, usually humming with the quiet productivity of 200 people managing corporate risk. Today, the silence felt heavy. I walked to my desk, keeping my head down. I could feel eyes on me. Paranoia. I told myself, "You are on a performance plan. Of course you feel watched. You are being watched." I logged into my workstation. My credentials worked, but the system felt sluggish. I tried to open the shared drive for the project I had been leading, a compliance audit for a regional logistics firm. Access denied, contact administrator. My heart hammered against my ribs. I picked up my desk phone and dialed IT. "Ticket number?" the technician asked. Bored. "I do not have a ticket." I said, "I just lost access to the K drive. I need it for the audit report." "Hold on." Keyboarding clattered in the background. There was a long pause. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. "Hello?" I asked. "I am looking at it," the technician said. His voice had changed. It was no longer bored. It was guarded. "Your permissions were modified last night. Group policy update." "Modified by who?" I asked. "I cannot see that," he said. "Too quickly. You need to talk to your manager. That is an HR flag." He hung up. I sat there, gripping the receiver. An HR flag. I stood up and walked to my manager's office. David was sitting behind his glass desk, staring at a spreadsheet. When I knocked on the doorframe, he jumped. "Kennedy," he said. He did not smile. I lost access to the K drive. I said, keeping my voice level, "It says it is an HR flag." "David, I cannot fix the audit if I cannot see the files." David took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who was trying very hard to memorize a script. "We are limiting the scope of your access during the PIP period," he said. I frowned. That was never mentioned in the meeting yesterday. How am I supposed to improve my performance if I cannot do the work? David looked at his hands. "Kennedy, the priority right now is for you to stay focused on your core competencies. We want to avoid any unnecessary escalations." "Escalations?" I repeated. "David, I am an analyst. My job is to escalate discrepancies. Please," he said. He looked up at me, and for a second, the corporate mask slipped. There was fear in his eyes. "Just keep your head down. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." I walked back to my desk, my legs feeling like lead. A few minutes later, a chat window popped up on my screen. It was Marcus, a senior developer who sat 2 rows over. We had started at Maryline the same month, 5 years ago. Lunch, walk. That was it. No emojis, no jokes. We met at the sandwich shop around the corner. Away from the building, the air was crisp, and the sky was a flat, slate gray. Marcus bought a coffee and led me to a bench near the park. He did not look at me. He watched the traffic passing by. "You need to be careful." "Ken," he said. "I am trying." I said, "David is acting like I am radioactive." "It is not just David," Marcus said. He took a sip of his coffee. "I was down in security this morning, upgrading the firmware on the badge readers. I saw the logs." "What logs?" "Someone pulled your entire entry and exit history for the last 18 months, Marcus said. "Not just the main door. Every internal door. The server room, the archives, the break room." "So?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They are building a case to fire me. They want to see if I am taking long lunches." "No," Marcus said. He turned to look at me then. His face was grim. "If they wanted to fire you for time theft, they would pull the last 3 months. They pulled 18 months, and they exported it to an external drive. That is not HR, Kennedy. That is legal discovery." I felt a cold prickle of sweat under my coat. "Why would legal be looking at my movements?" "I do not know." Marcus said, "But they flagged your profile as high risk, pending litigation." He stood up and crumpled his empty cup. "I did not tell you this," he said. He walked away back toward the office, leaving me sitting on the cold bench with a half-eaten sandwich I could no longer swallow. I did not go back to the office immediately. I sat there, watching the pigeons peck at crumbs on the pavement. The old man's whisper came back to me. "Check your name before Friday." I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling slightly. I opened my credit monitoring app. I usually checked it once a month, a habit from my days in consumer banking. The screen loaded. 780. Excellent. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was fine. I was being paranoid. Then I clicked on the Inquiries tab. There, at the very top of the list, was a soft inquiry dated yesterday. Dawson Firth, LLP. I did not recognize the name. I tapped on the details. It was a law firm based in the city. The inquiry type was listed as Asset Verification/Skip Trace. Skip Trace. That was what debt collectors did when you ran away. That was what bounty hunters did. I copied the phone number listed next to the firm's name and dialed it. Dawson and Firth. A woman's voice answered. Smooth, professional, bored. "Hi," I said, trying to sound authoritative. "My name is Kennedy Stewart. I am seeing an inquiry from your firm on my credit report, and I would like to know what it is regarding. I have no outstanding debts." "One moment. Please." There was the sound of clicking keys. "I do not show a file for a Kennedy Stewart," the receptionist said. "I am looking at the inquiry right now." I said, "It is dated yesterday. It must be a mistake." "Ma'am, we do not have a file. Can you check by date of birth? I asked. I gave her the date. The line went silent. The typing stopped abruptly. Ma'am, please hold, she said. Her voice was suddenly tight. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, then the line clicked. Hello? I said. The call had been disconnected. I stared at the phone. They hadn't put me on hold. They had hung up. I went back to work. But I did nothing. I moved my mouse every few minutes to keep my status active. But my mind was racing. Skip trace, pending litigation, identity restoration. I left at 5 o'clock on the dot. I did not say goodbye to David. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. It felt flimsy. I sat on my couch and opened my laptop. I needed to pay my electricity bill. I navigated to my bank's website and typed in my username and password. Account locked. For your security. Access has been suspended due to suspicious activity. Please visit a branch or call customer service. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number on the back of my debit card. I navigated the automated menu, shouting representative, until the machine gave up and connected me to a human. This is Mark in fraud prevention. The voice said, Can I get your full name? Kennedy Stewart. I gave him my details. I am locked out of my online banking. Mark. I said, I need to know why. Let me take a look. Miss Stewart. Yes. It looks like the security flag was tripped because of the new authorized user added to the checking account. I froze. Excuse me? I said. My voice was very quiet. The new authorized user. Mark said, It looks like you added a secondary signer this morning. I stood up. The room seemed to tilt. Mark, I was at work all morning. I did not add anyone to my account. Who was added? I cannot give the full name over the phone for privacy reasons. Only the initials on the file. It is listed as J.S. I do not know a J.S., I said, my voice rising. Mark, this is fraud. You need to lock the account. You need to tell me how this happened. It says here the change was made in branch, Mark said, sounding confused. At the Hollowbrook branch, the notes say, verified with government ID and biometric scan. That is impossible. I said, I was nowhere near the bank, Miss Stewart, if the ID was verified in person. I am telling you it wasn't me, I shouted. There was a silence on the line. Okay, Mark said slowly. I am escalating this to the fraud department. They will freeze the funds. But you will need to go into a branch tomorrow to sort this out. We cannot undo an in-person authorization over the phone. I hung up. I felt sick. In branch. With ID. Someone had walked into my bank, wearing my face, or something close enough to pass, and handed over a license with my name on it. I looked at the clock. It was 8:15. The time on the receipt. I grabbed my coat. I didn't think. I just moved. The Ridgeway Transit Center was quieter at night, but the air felt heavier. The shadows stretched long across the concrete floor. I walked past the ticket kiosk where I had met the old man. I did not look at the spot. I found the lockers in a narrow corridor near the restrooms. They were old, battered metal boxes painted a peeling orange. Locker 17C was at eye level. I stood in front of it, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pulled the crumpled receipt from my pocket and smoothed it out. There was no code on the receipt, just the locker number. I tried the handle. It was locked. I looked around. The corridor was empty. A janitor was mopping the floor at the far end. His back to me. I looked closer at the locker. There was a keypad. I typed in the time written on the receipt. 0815. The lock clicked. The door swung open an inch. I looked over my shoulder again. No one was watching. I opened the door. The locker was empty except for a single, plain manila envelope. It lay flat on the dusty metal bottom. I reached in and took it. It weighed almost nothing. I closed the locker and walked quickly toward the exit, clutching the envelope against my chest. I did not stop until I was in a well-lit coffee shop 3 blocks away. I sat at a table in the back corner and ordered a tea I didn't intend to drink. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document. The paper was warm, as if it had been copied recently. I read the header. State of New York Family Court, County of Hollowbrook. In the matter of the application for guardianship of Kennedy E. Stewart, an alleged incapacitated person. My blood ran cold. They had spelled my last name wrong, Stewart instead of Stewart, but my address, listed below it, was correct. My date of birth was correct. I turned the page. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. The document was titled, Identity Restoration Protective Filing. It looked like legal gibberish, paragraphs of dense text about fiduciary duty and asset protection, but then my eyes caught a paragraph in the middle of the second page. Petitioner alleges that the respondent, Kennedy E. Stewart, has demonstrated a rapid and severe decline in cognitive function, rendering her mentally unfit to manage her affairs, financial obligations, or legal standing. I stopped breathing. Mentally unfit. I read on. Petitioner submits evidence of erratic behavior, paranoia, and financial mismanagement, including but not limited to the recent failure to maintain employment standards at Marrowline Systems. They knew about the PIP. The PIP was not just a warning, it was evidence, and requests an emergency ex parte hearing to assume temporary guardianship of the respondent's person and property, pending a full psychiatric evaluation. I looked at the date of the hearing listed at the bottom of the page. Friday, November 24th, 9 a.m. and A. That was 3 days from now. I had never received a notice. I had never received a summons. If I hadn't helped an old man pay for a $3 bus ticket, the hearing would have happened without me. I would have been at work, staring at a spreadsheet, while a judge signed my life away to a stranger. I looked at the top of the document again. Who was the petitioner? Who was doing this? The line for petitioner was blank. It just said, filed on behalf of interested party. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. The sounds of the coffee shop faded away. The clinking of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine. It all sounded miles away. Filing you out of your own life. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a process. I folded the paper and put it back in the envelope. My hand brushed against something else inside. A small sticky note attached to the back of the last page. I pulled it out. It was written in the same shaky blue ink as the receipt. They changed your mailing address 2 months ago. You are already a ghost. I sat there in the bright, artificial light, feeling the terror settle into my bones. It wasn't the panic of a sudden scare. It was the heavy, suffocating weight of realization. I was not just losing my job. I was being erased. And on Friday morning, unless I did something, Kennedy Stewart was going to cease to exist. The coffee shop was closing. The barista, a college-aged girl with purple braids, was flipping chairs onto tables with aggressive thuds. I sat in the corner, the manila envelope resting on the formica table like an unexploded bomb. For 10 minutes, I did nothing but breathe. In, for 4 counts. Hold, for 4 counts. Out, for 4 counts. It was a technique I had learned during my first year in high-risk compliance. Back when the stress of auditing billion-dollar ledgers used to make my hands shake, panic was a luxury I could not afford. Panic was sloppy. Panic left a trail. If the document in front of me was real, and the cold, sick weight in my stomach told me it was, then someone had spent months constructing a version of Kennedy Stewart that was incompetent, unstable, and ready for custodial care. They had built a paper doll, and on Friday morning, they were going to burn the real me and let the doll take my place. I needed to think like an analyst. I needed to think like them. I pulled my phone out. My hands were steady now, forced into submission by sheer will. I did not take the documents home. If my apartment was compromised, and the bank fraud suggested my personal data was already in the wind, I could not risk physical evidence being found in my possession. They could claim I had forged it. They could claim it was part of my paranoid delusion. I laid the pages flat on the table. I took high-resolution photos of every page, ensuring the edges were visible. Then, I opened a metadata viewer app I used for work. I scanned the barcode at the bottom of the court filing. It decoded into a case number, CV-2023-09-1142. I checked the timestamp on the photo of the petition. It had been generated 3 days ago. I created a new, encrypted cloud storage account using a burner email address I had set up years ago for junk mail. I uploaded the photos, then I stood up, walked to the trash can by the condiment station, and buried the envelope and the photocopies deep under a pile of wet coffee grounds and empty cups. If they were watching, let them think I had thrown it away. Let them think I was confused and dismissive. I walked out into the cold night air. I did not go home. I walked 3 blocks to a 24-hour diner, ordered a black coffee, and opened my laptop. I needed a second opinion, but not from a lawyer, not yet. Lawyers looked at the law. I needed someone who looked at the human machinery of a corporation. I texted Maya Klein. Emergency, not medical, career. Need you to call me on Signal, now. Maya and I had gone to college together. She was now a senior HR director at a logistics firm in Chicago. She knew how the gears turned. She called 3 minutes later. Kennedy? Her voice was sharp. Alert. It is 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. What is wrong? I kept my voice low. Leaning into the booth. Someone is filing for guardianship over me. Maya. They are claiming I am mentally unfit. They have a hearing scheduled for Friday. The silence on the line was absolute. Then, Maya let out a breath that sounded like a hiss. Who is the petitioner? She asked. It is sealed. Or at least, the copy I saw didn't list it, but they cite my performance improvement plan at Maryline. They cite erratic behavior. Kennedy, listen to me very carefully, Maya said. Her tone had shifted from friend to professional. You are in the kill zone. This is not just about firing you. If a court declares you incompetent, even temporarily, your career in compliance is over. You cannot hold a fiduciary role with a guardianship record. You cannot get bonded. You cannot get security clearance. I know. I said, that is why I need to fight it. Maya hesitated. You have to understand how this works. The accusation alone is the weapon. If you go into that courtroom and you scream, or you cry, or you look even a little bit tired, you validate their narrative. The burden of proof in these emergency hearings is terrifyingly low. They just need to show imminent risk. They changed my address. I said, that is how they kept me from getting the notices. That is the play, Maya said grimly. It is called sewer service. They throw the summons down the sewer, or send it to an address where they know you will never see it, and then tell the judge you failed to appear. Default judgment. By the time you find out, you are already a ward of the state. How do I stop it? You need to prove sanity, Maya said, and you cannot do that by acting like a victim. You need a paper trail that proves you are functioning, rational, and in control. And Kennedy? Yeah? Do not trust anyone at your office if they are citing internal HR documents in a sealed court filing. The leak is coming from inside the house. I hung up. I sat in the diner until 3 a.m, building a timeline in a notebook. October 12th. First glitch with my keycard. October 24th. Notification of address change on my 401k. I had assumed it was a system error and corrected it. November 1st. The PIP meeting. November 15th. Direct deposit failure. November 21st. The bus station. It was a slow, deliberate erosion of my stability. They hadn't just attacked me. They had edited my reality. I went home at 4. I slept for 2 hours in my clothes, sitting on top of the covers. Wednesday morning. I called in sick. I told David I had a migraine. He didn't even sound suspicious. He just sounded relieved not to have to deal with me. I took a cab to the Hollowbrook Municipal Court. It was a brutalist concrete building that smelled of floor wax and despair. I went through the metal detectors, my bag sliding through the X-ray machine, and took the elevator to the clerk of court's office. The room was vast, filled with rows of metal shelving and clerks typing furiously. I pulled a ticket, number 42, and waited. When my number was called, I walked to the window. The clerk was a heavy-set woman with kind eyes and a nameplate that read Patricia. I need to check the status of a filing. I said, case number CV-2023 09-1142. Patricia typed the number in. Her eyebrows went up. This is a sealed file. Hun, she said, I cannot give you copies. I am the respondent. I said, I slid my driver's license under the glass partition. Kennedy Stewart. I just want to confirm the hearing date. She picked up my license and looked at it, then back at the screen. She frowned. She typed something else. That is odd, she muttered. What is odd? I asked. My heart started that familiar, frantic hammering. Patricia lowered her voice. The system has a flag here. It says notices were returned undeliverable. Update of address was filed. She squinted at the screen. 2 months ago, October 19th, I never moved. I said, I have lived at the same address for 4 years. Who filed the change? She shook her head. It was an administrative update. Usually means it came from the post office or a verified creditor. But here's the thing. She paused, looking at me with genuine concern. The system has a do not release tag on your contact info. That usually only happens in protective custody cases, or if the person is... If the person is what? I pressed. If the person is considered a flight risk or fundamentally incapacitated. She finished softly. I felt the blood drain from my face. I need to update it back. I said, I am standing right here. That is my license. I live on Elm Street. Okay, Patricia said. Let me just verify you in the state database so I can override the lock. She scanned the barcode on the back of my license. The scanner beeped. A harsh, descending tone. She tried it again. Beep. She looked up at me, her expression hardening. This license is not verifying. She said, What do you mean? It is valid until 2028. The system says invalid record, Patricia said. She pushed the license back under the glass. I cannot update the file. Ma'am, you need to go to the DMV. But the hearing is Friday, I said, my voice rising despite my promise to Maya. If I do not get the notices... Ma'am, Patricia said, louder this time. I cannot help you if the ID is not valid. Please step aside. I grabbed my license. My hands were shaking. I walked away from the window, feeling the eyes of the other people in the waiting room on me. They saw a woman in a nice coat who couldn't even manage a simple administrative task. They saw exactly what the paperwork said I was. I left the courthouse and walked blindly for 6 blocks. The terrifying genius of it was the silence. There was no confrontation, no shouting match, just a quiet digital decoupling of my identity from the systems that proved I existed. I needed to go home. I needed to regroup. When I got to my apartment building, the lobby was empty. I walked to the bank of metal mailboxes built into the wall. I pulled out my keyring and inserted the small brass key into box 404. It didn't turn. I jiggled it. Nothing. It felt like the wrong key. I pulled it out and checked it. It was the same key I had used yesterday. I tried again, twisting harder. Excuse me? I jumped. The building manager, a man named Gary who usually spent his days watching soccer on his phone in the office, was standing behind me. Gary, I said, my key isn't working. Oh, yeah, Gary said. He looked uncomfortable. He scratched the back of his neck. Maintenance had to switch the cylinder out this morning. Why? I asked. I did not request a lock change. Security update, he said vaguely. We had some reports of tampering in the area. Management decided to swap the barrels on the whole row. Can I have the new key? I asked. Gary looked at his shoes. I do not have them yet. The locksmith took the master set to get copies made. Should be back tomorrow. Tomorrow? I said. Gary, I have mail in there. Important mail. Sorry, Kennedy. Just following protocol. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He was lying. I could see it in the way he shifted his weight. Someone had gotten to him. Maybe they flashed a badge. Maybe they offered him $50. Maybe they just told him I was part of an investigation and he shouldn't ask questions. I walked up the stairs to my apartment, my legs feeling heavy. They were cutting the lines. Bank, court, mail. I stood in the center of my living room. It looked the same as it always did. The beige sofa, the bookshelf organized by color. the dying fern in the corner, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a stage set that was about to be struck. I felt a sudden, sharp spike of paranoia. I looked at the smoke detector on the ceiling. Was there a camera in it? I looked at my laptop webcam. I grabbed a piece of electrical tape from the junk drawer and covered the lens. I was spiraling. I needed to stop, focus on the source. I told myself, the old man, he was the only variable that didn't fit the pattern. Everything else was subtraction, taking away my money, my access, my identity. He was addition. He had given me something. I waited until evening. I put on a baseball cap and a heavy scarf, obscuring my face. I took the bus back to the Ridgeway Transit Center. The station was busier tonight. Commuters were shoulder to shoulder. I went to the information booth. The attendant was a different one from the night before. A young guy with headphones around his neck and a bored expression. I need to ask about a man who hangs around here. I said, older, maybe 70s, wears a gray windbreaker. Looks sad. The kid looked up. You mean the ghost? The ghost? That is what we call him. He does not talk to anybody, just watches the ticket machines. Does he have a name? I asked. The kid shrugged. I think the security guys call him Walter. Walter Brigg? Or Briggs? Something like that. Walter Brigg? Why does he watch the machines? I asked. The kid leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. He used to work for the courts or something. He told my manager once that he likes to see people get where they are going because he spent 40 years stopping them. The attendant hesitated, looking past me. He is not allowed in here officially. Loitering policy. But we let him stay if it is cold. He comes in when someone is in trouble. Like, really in trouble. Did you see him tonight? No, haven't seen him since yesterday. I thanked him and walked away. I pulled out my phone and searched for Walter Brigg Process Server Hollowbrook. The results were sparse, but telling. A LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated in 10 years. A mention in a local news article from 2015 about a class action lawsuit against a debt collection agency. Walter Brigg had been a whistleblower. He had exposed a company for sewer service, faking delivery of summons documents. He wasn't just a random old man. He was an expert in the exact weapon being used against me. I went back to the lockers. My heart was thumping. Would there be another message? It seemed impossible. He couldn't know I would come back, but the old man, Walter, knew the system. He knew that when people got scared, they went back to the place where the trouble started. I looked at locker 17C. It was closed. I typed in the time from the previous receipt. 0815. The light flashed red. Error. I stood there, feeling foolish. Of course it wouldn't work. Then I looked closely at the keypad. There was a smudge of grease on the 2, the 0, and the 4. 2024. The current year? Too obvious. 0420. 2400. Midnight. I tried 2400. Click. The door swung open. There was no envelope this time, just a small scrap of paper, torn from the corner of a newspaper. On it, written in the same shaky blue ink, was a single name. Ainsley Voss. I stared at the name, and the noise of the station fell away. Ainsley Voss. I knew her. God, I knew her. Ainsley was the vendor relationship lead at Marrowline. She was polished, efficient, and perpetually smiling. She was the kind of corporate operator who remembered your birthday but forgot to invite you to the strategy meeting. 6 months ago, I had been assigned to audit a supply chain contract that Ainsley managed. I had found irregularities, nothing criminal, or so I thought, just invoices that were vague, service dates that didn't match delivery logs, and a vendor called North Barrow Protection that seemed to be billing us for security services at empty warehouses. I had written a report. I had flagged it as a yellow risk, process gap. Ainsley had been so helpful. She had thanked me for catching the clerical errors. She had taken me out for coffee. She had promised to fix it. And 2 weeks later, my team was restructured. Ainsley had suggested that perhaps I was burned out, that the audit had been too much for me. She had been the one to recommend David put me on a lighter load. I had thought she was being patronizing. Now I realized she was pruning me. She wasn't just a colleague. She was the architect. I left the station and hailed a cab. I couldn't go home. I needed internet access that wasn't monitored. I went to a generic business hotel near the airport and paid cash for a room. I connected my laptop to the hotel Wi-Fi. Routing it through a VPN, I logged into my archived email. I knew it was risky. Logging in might trigger an alert. But I had to know. I searched for North Barrow Protection. 0 results. That was impossible. I had sent at least 10 emails about that vendor. I had sent the final report to legal, copying David and Ainsley. I searched my sent folder for the date I submitted the report, May 12th. The email was there, but the attachment icon was gone. I clicked on the message. The body text was generic. Please find attached the Q2 audit findings, but there was no file. I checked the next email in the thread. It was a reply from legal. Kennedy, this email is empty. Please resend. I stared at the screen. I distinctly remembered attaching the file. I remembered checking it twice. I tried to restore the item from the deleted items recovery folder, a trick Marcus in IT had taught me years ago. Error. Item purged per retention policy. Retention policy? We were a compliance firm. We kept everything for 7 years. You didn't purge audit findings after 6 months unless you were scrubbing a crime scene. Someone with administrator access had gone into the back end and surgically removed the attachment. And not just from my inbox, from the server. It wasn't just Ainsley. Ainsley was in vendor management. She didn't have IT privileges. She had help. I sat back in the stiff hotel chair. My mental decline wasn't random. It was a cover-up. I had seen something in those North Barrow invoices that I wasn't supposed to understand. They weren't just billing for empty warehouses. They were funding something else. And when I flagged it, they decided it was cleaner to discredit the witness than to fix the books. If I was declared incompetent, my testimony would be worthless. My audit reports would be dismissed as the ramblings of a disturbed employee. They are filing you out of your own life, Walter had said. He was right. It was a hostile takeover of a human being. I closed the laptop. My hands were no longer shaking. Panic was gone. In its place was a cold, hard clarity. They thought they were dealing with a victim. They thought they were dealing with a woman who would cry and beg and crumble under the weight of their forms and their policies. But they had forgotten one thing. I was a compliance analyst. I knew how to follow a trail. I knew that every deleted file left a shadow, and every fake transaction left a scar. I had 48 hours until the hearing. I was going to build the most comprehensive, airtight, undeniable evidence package of my life. I pulled out my notebook and turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, Project, Resurrection. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the one number I knew I shouldn't call, but the only one that could help me now. I dialed the number for the main switchboard at Marrowline Systems. Security desk, a voice answered. This is Kennedy Stewart, I said, my voice flat and professional. I left my badge in the office. I need to request a temporary pass for early access tomorrow morning. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I was going back to the scene of the crime. Wednesday morning began not with a grand declaration of war, but with a trip to a discount pharmacy on the edge of town. I stood in the aisle between the vitamins and the seasonal candy, staring at a blister-packed prepaid phone. It was a cheap, plastic brick that looked like it belonged in 2010. I paid $40 in cash. I bought a top-up card for 60 minutes of talk time. I wore my glasses instead of my contacts, and I kept my head down. This was not paranoia. This was procedure. In my job as a compliance analyst, we had a term for it: sterilizing the environment. If a system was compromised, you did not try to patch it while you were still using it. You isolated it. You built a parallel workflow. My iPhone was in my apartment, powered down and shoved into the back of my sock drawer. My laptop was offline. I was now operating on analog time. I sat in a booth at a fast food restaurant across the street, peeling the plastic film off the cheap phone. I activated it, waiting for the generic chime. Then I opened a fresh spiral-bound notebook. Step 1. The bank. I needed to secure the perimeter of my finances before they drained me dry. I walked into the Hollowbrook branch of my bank at 9:15. The air conditioning was aggressive, and the carpet smelled of industrial cleaner. I did not go to the teller line. I walked straight to the glass-walled office of the branch manager. His nameplate said Robert Vance. He was a man in his 40s with a suit that was slightly too shiny and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Ms. Stewart," he said, gesturing to the chair. I saw the notes from the fraud department. A terrible mix-up. It was not a mix-up. "Robert," I said. I did not sit down. "Someone walked into this branch yesterday, presented identification that was not mine, and you gave them access to my life." Robert sighed, a sound of professional fatigue. He tapped his keyboard. "Look, frauds are sophisticated these days. Synthetic IDs, deepfakes. It happens to the best of us. But good news? We can fix this right now." He spun his monitor around. "I can remove the authorized user immediately." He said, "We will reset your passcode, issue you a new debit card, and it will be like it never happened. No harm, no foul." I looked at the screen. The cursor was hovering over a button marked Delete User. "Do not click that," I said. Robert blinked. "Excuse me? If you delete the user, you delete the timestamp," I said. "You delete the transaction log associated with their entry." "Ms. Stewart, I am trying to help you secure your account. No, you are trying to clean up a liability," I said. I leaned forward, placing my hands on his desk. "I want the security footage." Robert froze. His smile tightened. "The footage from yesterday morning." I continued. 10 a.m. According to the fraud line, I want to see the person who stood at your counter and signed my name. "I cannot give you that," Robert said, his voice dropping an octave. "That is proprietary bank data. It includes other customers, privacy policies. I am the customer in the transaction," I snapped. Then I lowered my voice, forcing myself to sound like the auditor I was. "Robert, if you delete that user record without preserving the evidence, I will report this branch to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for spoliation of evidence in an active fraud investigation." Robert pulled his hand back from the mouse. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. He saw the tension in my jaw, the notebook in my hand. He realized I wasn't just an upset customer. I was a problem. "I cannot give you the video," he said, stiffly, "but I can tag the file for preservation. If law enforcement subpoenas it, tag it," I said, "and give me the case number for the preservation order." He wrote a number on a sticky note and slid it across the desk. I took it. I wrote down the time, the date, and Robert's full name in my notebook. I walked out of the bank with my account still compromised, the authorized user still lurking in the system. It felt insane to leave the door open, but I knew that closing it would mean locking myself out of the truth. I needed that intruder to feel safe. I needed them to make a move. Step 2. The job. I took a bus to the Marrow Line Systems headquarters. It was a glass monolith in the financial district, a building designed to project transparency while hiding everything. My badge still worked at the turnstile, but the beep sounded hesitant, or maybe that was just my nerves. I went up to the 14th floor. The office was humming, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, the mundane symphony of corporate America. I walked to my desk. My computer was gone. The docking station was empty. The monitors were dark. I stood there, my bag slipping from my shoulder. A few heads turned, then quickly looked away. The office pariah. I walked to David's office. The blinds were drawn halfway, which never happened. David loved natural light. I knocked and entered. David was staring at his phone. He jumped when he saw me. "Kennedy," he said. He stood up, smoothing his tie. You called in sick." "I am feeling better," I said. "Where is my computer?" "David?" He swallowed. He looked past me, at the closed door. "It took it for imaging." "Imaging?" I asked. "Why?" "Standard procedure during a PIP," he said. The lie was so thin it was transparent. To ensure. Data integrity. David, I said. I stepped closer. You and I have worked together for 3 years. You know I am not incompetent. You know I am not unstable. What is going on? David's face crumpled slightly. For a second, the manager mask fell away, and I saw a man who was terrified. He looked tired, gray-faced. Kennedy, please, he whispered, just go home. Take the rest of the week. Are they threatening you too? I asked. He flinched. He picked up a file from his desk and held it like a shield. We have strict instructions, he said, his voice loud and formal now, clearly meant for anyone listening outside. You are to be on administrative leave until the hearing on Friday. Your access to the building is being revoked as of... He checked his watch. 1,200 hours. He looked at me with pleading eyes. Go. His eyes said, run. I realized then that David wasn't the enemy. He was a hostage. Someone had leverage on him, his mortgage, his pension, maybe a secret he couldn't afford to have exposed. I nodded slowly. I understand. I said. I turned to leave. Kennedy, he said. I stopped. Check your mail, he said. I looked back. He was staring at his computer screen, typing fast, pretending he hadn't spoken. I walked out. I didn't have my computer, but I had my brain, and I knew that whatever David wanted me to check, it wasn't in my corporate inbox. Step 3. The lawyer. I didn't go to a high-rise firm. I couldn't afford a retainer that cost more than my car. And I didn't trust anyone who played golf with the partners at Merrowline. I went to the Hollowbrook Legal Aid Clinic. It was located in a converted storefront 3 blocks from the courthouse. The waiting room was full of people holding eviction notices and restraining orders. I waited 2 hours. Finally, a young woman called my name. Elena Marwick looked like she hadn't slept in a week, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She wore a cardigan over a blouse that had seen better days, and her desk was a fortress of manila folders. I sat down and placed my notebook on the desk. I need help stopping a guardianship petition, I said. Elena sighed and rubbed her temples. Okay, family dispute? Aging parent? No. I said, me, someone is filing it against me to stop me from exposing corporate fraud. Elena stopped rubbing her temples. She looked at me. Let me see the papers, she said. I showed her the photos on my phone, the ones I had taken of the envelope in the locker. She scrolled through them, her expression shifting from fatigue to intense focus. She zoomed in on the legal boilerplate. She read the clauses about incapacity and restoration of person. Then she put the phone down and looked at me. This is not a standard family court filing. She said, the language? Look at this clause here. Immediate sequestration of assets to prevent dissipation. And here, temporary restriction of communication privileges. She leaned back. This is the Creston Hale playbook. Who? I asked. Creston Hale Group. Elena said, they are a boutique firm, very expensive, very aggressive. They specialize in what they call high-conflict asset management. Usually, they do this to elderly billionaires whose children want to seize the estate before daddy marries the nurse. But lately what? Lately? We have seen them popping up in employment disputes, she said. It is a new tactic. Instead of firing a whistleblower and risking a wrongful termination suit, they file for guardianship. They claim the employee is having a mental breakdown. If they win, they get legal control over the employee's decisions, including the decision to sue or testify. My stomach turned over. It was slavery with a court seal. Can we stop it? I asked. Elena tapped the desk. We can try, but we are fighting a ghost. The petitioner is listed as interested party. We do not even know who signed the check. She pulled a file from a stack. I can pull the court jacket. Since you are the respondent, I can get access to the exhibits. She logged into the court portal. Her fingers flew across the keys. Here it is, she said. Case 1142. Okay. They have filed 2 affidavits in support of the petition. 2? I asked. One from a Mrs. Martha Gable. Is that a neighbor? Yes, I said. She lives in 4B. She is 80 years old. Elena read from the screen. Affiant states that the respondent has exhibited erratic behavior, including screaming at invisible people in the hallway and leaving the gas stove on. Affiant fears for the safety of the building. That is a lie. I said, I have never left the stove on. And I don't scream. Elena kept reading. Second affidavit is from a Mr. Simon Hertz, former colleague. Simon. I said, he left Marrowline 6 months ago. He was fired for incompetence. Affiant states that during his tenure, the respondent showed signs of paranoid delusion, claiming that vendors were spying on the company. I felt the trap snapping shut. They were using my actual work, my compliance findings, and framing them as symptoms of illness. I need to talk to Mrs. Gable. I said, be careful. Elena warned, if you confront a witness, they will say you are harassing them. It proves the instability narrative. I will be careful. I said, I left the clinic with Elena's card and a promise that she would draft a motion to unseal the petitioner's identity, but motions took time, and I had 48 hours. Step 4. The neighbor. I waited until 5 o'clock. I baked a loaf of banana bread. It was an absurd thing to do in the middle of a crisis, but it was part of the strategy. You didn't harass a witness with banana bread. I knocked on 4B. Mrs. Gable opened the door. She was a sweet, bird-like woman who always wore floral aprons. Kennedy, she said, smiling. I haven't seen you all week. I froze. She was smiling. She didn't look like a woman who was terrified of her screaming. Gas-leaving neighbor. Hi, Mrs. Gable, I said, holding out the bread. I just wanted to drop this off. And I wanted to ask you something. Come in, she said. I stepped into her apartment. It smelled of lavender and dust. Mrs. Gable, I said gently, did someone come to talk to you about me recently? A lawyer? She blinked. Oh, yes, a nice young man, very well dressed. Yesterday morning. What did he want? He said there was some administrative mix-up with the building's insurance. She said, he just needed to confirm that you were still the resident in 404. He said they were updating the safety files. Did you sign anything? I asked, my heart pounding. Just a little form, she said, confirming I had seen you. He said it was just a residency verification. Why? Is something wrong? I looked at her innocent, confused face. She hadn't sworn an affidavit against me. She had signed a blank form, or a misleading one, and they had filled in the rest. Did he have a name? I asked. No, but he was very polite. He had a lovely silver tie clip, shaped like a little scales of justice, a silver tie clip. I thanked her and left. I stood in the hallway, shaking. It wasn't just fraud. It was perjury. They were manufacturing witnesses out of thin air. Step 5. The ghost. I received a text on my burner phone at 7 p.m., diner on 4th, back booth, come alone. It was from a number I didn't know. Walter. I went to the diner. It was a greasy spoon, loud with the clatter of plates and the roar of a deep fryer. Walter Brigg was sitting in the back booth, wearing the same gray windbreaker. He was eating a plate of eggs with methodical slowness. I slid into the seat opposite him. You are loud, he said, without looking up. Excuse me? Not your voice, he said. Your movements. You're running around town, pinging off cell towers, using credit cards. You leave a wake like a speedboat. I am using cash. I said, and a burner phone. He looked up then. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and very tired. Good. You are learning. Why are you helping me? I asked. I do not like bullies, Walter said, and I do not like seeing my profession used for a hit job. He took a sip of coffee. I saw the packet. Kennedy. The process server packet. I was at the copy shop near the courthouse. I still go there to keep up with things. I saw a guy copying a stack of files. I saw your name. I saw the address. And I saw the sewer service instruction code on the cover sheet. What code? Non-S/alt. It means, do not establish contact. Use alternative service. It is what you write when you want the server to dump the papers in a trash can and claim they taped them to the door. He leaned in closer. But that is not the worst part. The worst part is the exhibits. I saw the affidavits. I said, my neighbor, my coworker, small potatoes. Walter said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. He slid it across the table. This is the copy they plan to play for the judge. He said, what is it? Audio, Walter said. Exhibit C. Recording of respondent's verbal breakdown. I took the drive. My hand felt cold. I listened to it in the car. Walter said, it is you. Or at least, it sounds like you. You are screaming. You are threatening to burn the building down. You are ranting about conspiracies. I have never done that. I whispered, I know, Walter said. I listened closely. The background noise. It jumps. The tone of your voice changes mid-sentence. It is spliced. They took snippets of you talking, maybe on the phone, maybe in meetings, and they stitched them together. It is a Frankenstein tape. I felt sick. The violation was visceral. They had stolen my voice. If you go into that courtroom and try to argue, Walter said, they will play that tape. And if you get angry, if you raise your voice, the judge will hear the similarity. You will prove their case for them. So what do? I asked. Do I just let them win? No, Walter said. He looked at the door, scanning the room. You find the seams. Every fake has seams. The neighbor who didn't know what she signed. The audio that has background noise that doesn't match the location. You do not argue innocence. You prove mechanics. You show the judge the glue. He stood up. One more thing, he said. Yeah? Ainsley Voss, he said. You were looking for her. She is the key. I said, she is the money, Walter corrected. I made some calls to friends in the clerk's office. The filing fee for your guardianship petition? It wasn't paid by Creston Hale. It was paid by a check from a company called Viridian Risk Consulting. I wrote the name down. Viridian's registered address is the same building as Creston Hale. Walter said, but Suite 400. Creston is Suite 500. They are neighbors. I said, they are partners. Walter said, Ainsley funnels the corporate money to Viridian. Viridian pays the law firm to remove the problem. The problem is you. He dropped a $5 bill on the table. Keep your head down. Kennedy, they are getting impatient. He walked out. Step 6. The connection. I went back to my hotel room. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the glow of the laptop screen. Viridian Risk Consulting. I searched the name on the state business registry. It was an LLC, formed 6 months ago. The registered agent was a generic corporate service. But I had the invoices. I had the memories of the invoices I had audited. I closed my eyes, visualizing the spreadsheets I had looked at in May. North Barrow Protection. That was the vendor Ainsley used to drain the budget. I typed North Barrow Protection into a search engine again. Still nothing. Then I tried a different query. I searched the address Walter had mentioned. 1400 State Street, Suite 400. A hit? A PDF from a building permit application. Tenant. Viridian Risk Consulting / North Barrow Holdings. They were the same entity. Ainsley wasn't just using a vendor. She was paying a shell company that she likely controlled or was partnered with. And that shell company was funding the legal attack against me. It was a circle. Marrowline money was being stolen, laundered through Viridian, and used to hire Creston Hale to silence the auditor who found the leak. It was elegant. It was evil. I started typing a summary. I needed to send this to someone. Not David, not the police. They wouldn't understand the financial complexity in time. I needed the one channel that was supposed to be protected. I logged into Marrowline's external ethics portal. I had the URL memorized. It was hosted by a third party, theoretically anonymous. I typed in my report key from May. Case 88921. The screen loaded. Status: closed. Resolution: unsubstantiated. Reporter credibility issues noted. My heart sank. They had gotten to the portal administrator, or maybe Ainsley was the administrator. Then, a notification chime pinged on my laptop. Not an email, a direct message on the portal interface itself. I stared at the screen. That was impossible. The portal was one way. A chat box opened in the bottom right corner. Sender. Admin message. We know you are looking at the file. Kennedy. I froze. Message. You have 36 hours. Stop digging or we finish the filing. If we get the guardianship, we choose your doctors. Think about that. I slammed the laptop shut. The room was silent, but it felt like the walls were breathing. We choose your doctors. It wasn't just about money. It was about total, physical control. If they won on Friday, they could institutionalize me. They could medicate me until I really was the vegetable they claimed I was. I sat in the dark, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I looked at the burner phone. I looked at the notebook. Fear was a cold fluid filling my lungs. But beneath the fear, there was something else, a hard, jagged anger. They had threatened my body. They had threatened my mind. I picked up the notebook. I wrote down the time of the message. 2100 hours. I wrote down the content of the threat. I wasn't going to stop digging. I was going to grab a shovel. I picked up the phone and dialed Elena Marwick's number. Elena, I said when she answered. Kennedy? It is late. I know. I said, I know how they are moving the money, and I know who the man with the tie clip is. Who? He works for the security firm that guards my building. I said, and the bank? And Marrowline? What? North Barrow Protection. I said, they are the muscle. Creston Hale is the brain. Ainsley Voss is the wallet. I took a deep breath. We are going to need a subpoena for the security logs of the bus station. Elena, why the bus station? Because, I said, remembering the janitor I had seen mopping the floor near the lockers. Because Walter Brigg isn't the only one who uses those lockers. And I bet if we look at the footage, we will see a man with a silver tie clip putting an envelope in locker 17C. I hung up. Friday was coming, and I was going to be ready. The darkness of the hotel room was not empty. It was filled with the static of my own mind, a low-frequency hum of doubt that was louder than the traffic on the highway outside. It was 3 o'clock on Thursday morning, 29 hours before the hearing that would decide if I was still a person in the eyes of the law. I lay on top of the stiff hotel sheets, staring at the ceiling. My phone, the old one, the smart one I was supposed to keep off, was in my hand. I had turned it on for just a minute, a moment of weakness, to scroll through my old text messages. I read a thread from 2 months ago with my mother. I was complaining about the workload at Marrowline. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I had written, they keep moving the goalposts. I stared at the words. Losing my mind. I scrolled up. A text to an ex-boyfriend, sent late at night after a glass of wine. Sometimes I think the whole world is gaslighting me. I felt a cold flush of shame, taken out of context, stripped of the irony and the exhaustion of the moment. I sounded paranoid. I sounded unstable. I sounded exactly like the woman described in the petition. I dropped the phone on the mattress as if it were hot. This was how they did it. They didn't need to invent a new person. They just needed to curate the worst moments of the real one. They took your sarcasm, your grief, your midnight worries, and they stitched them into a straitjacket. For an hour. I lay there paralyzed. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was cracking. Maybe the missing emails and the declined cards were just accidents, and I was spinning a conspiracy to protect my ego from the reality of my own failure. Then I remembered the old man, Walter. They are filing you out of your own life. A hallucination didn't hand you a physical receipt with a locker number. A delusion didn't result in a stranger paying your filing fees. I sat up. I forced my feet onto the cold carpet. I needed order, if I let the chaos in. They won. I showered. I scrubbed my skin until it was pink. I dressed in the same clothes I had worn yesterday. But I pressed the blouse with the hotel iron until the creases were sharp enough to cut paper. I made the bed, pulling the corners tight. I ate a protein bar. I drank a glass of tap water. I was Kennedy Stewart. I was a senior compliance analyst. I was not a case file. At 8 in the morning, I met Elena Marwick at the courthouse steps. She looked better than she had the day before. She was wearing a blazer that fit, and she was carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy. "We are going in for an emergency motion," she said. "We are asking the judge to unseal the exhibits and correct the address of record immediately. It is a long shot without a hearing, but I am arguing due process violation." I waited on a wooden bench in the hallway while she went into chambers. The courthouse was waking up. Lawyers in expensive suits brushed past people in sweatpants. It was the marketplace of misery. 30 minutes later, Elena came out. Her face was neutral, but there was a spark in her eyes. Good news and bad news. She said, "Give me the good." I said, "The judge granted the address correction." Elena said, "He was not happy about the returned notices. He ordered the clerk to update your file to your actual address and to accept service of our response. You are officially back on the grid." And the bad? He denied the request to unseal the audio exhibit before the hearing. She said, "He ruled that since it contains sensitive medical information, your alleged breakdown, it should remain under seal until it is presented in open court tomorrow. So we go in blind." I said, "Not entirely." Elena said. She lowered her voice. "The clerk gave me the index list, just the file names and metadata headers for the evidence they submitted. It is not the content, but it is the container." She handed me a printout. I scanned the list. Exhibit A, Affidavit of M, Gable. Exhibit B, Affidavit of S, Hertz. Exhibit C, audio file. 091523 subject incident, wave. Exhibit D, incident report, Maroline HR. I stopped at Exhibit C, 091523, September 15th, 2023. I closed my eyes, accessing the calendar in my head. September 15th. That was a Friday. 2 months ago. I kept the date locked in my mind. We need to prove intent. I said to Elena, "We need to prove this isn't just a mistake, but a conspiracy. Then give me something to fight with," she said. I left the courthouse and went to a public library. I found a terminal in the corner, one with a privacy screen. I needed to send a message, but I needed to be sure it was heard by the right ears. I logged into my webmail. I composed an email to Ainsley Voss at her Maroline work address. Subject: The North Barrow Reconciliation. Ainsley. I am reviewing my personal notes from the May audit to prepare for my defense. I found a discrepancy in the ledger regarding the Blue Owl variance. I think we should discuss this before I submit it to the court. Kennedy. There was no Blue Owl variance. I made the phrase up. It was nonsense. I hit send. Then I waited. I sat in the library for 3 hours, reading a book on administrative law that I didn't understand, checking my burner phone every 10 minutes. At 1 in the afternoon, my burner phone buzzed. It was a text from a blocked number. "The Blue Owl is extinct. Stop talking about things you do not understand, or the hearing will be the least of your problems." I stared at the screen, a cold smile touching my lips. Ainsley hadn't just received the email. She had panicked, and by using the specific nonsense phrase I had invented, Blue Owl, she had confirmed that she was the one behind the anonymous threats. She was monitoring my communications, and she was terrified of what I might know. I took a screenshot of the text. Step 1. Confirmed. Now for the inside man. I took the bus to the financial district. I used the temporary badge access I had bluffed my way into organizing the night before. A risk, but a calculated one. The security guard at the front desk was a temp. He didn't know about the PIP or the ban. He saw a valid employee ID number in the system and printed me a day pass. I didn't go to my desk. I went to the fire stairs on the 14th floor. I knew David's routine. At 2:30, he took a smoke break. He didn't smoke cigarettes. He smoked a vape pen that smelled like vanilla. And he did it in the stairwell between the 14th and 15th floors, because he was afraid of being seen on the street. I waited on the landing, listening to the hum of the ventilation system. At 2:35, the heavy metal door opened. David stepped in. Loosening his tie, he pulled a silver pen from his pocket and inhaled. "David," I said. He jumped, dropping the vape. It clattered on the concrete. "Kennedy," he gasped. He looked at the door, panic flaring in his eyes. "You cannot be here. If security sees you, they won't." I said. I picked up his vape and handed it to him. He looked at me, his hand shaking as he took it. You look focused, he said. I am focused. David, I am fighting for my life. He slumped against the railing. He looked older than he had on Tuesday. The lines around his mouth were deep trenches. I didn't want to do it. He whispered, Do what? I asked. The PIP, he said. He rubbed his face. HR called me in. Not the usual HR reps, a consultant. She sat there with a binder already prepared. She told me you were showing signs of burnout. She told me I needed to document it to protect the firm. And you just signed it? Kennedy. They knew about my refinancing, he said. His voice cracked. They knew I was leveraged on the condo. They hinted, just hinted, that my own position was being reviewed. They said if I couldn't manage my team, maybe I wasn't the right fit. So you traded me for your mortgage. I said, I didn't think they would go this far. He said, I thought they just wanted to fire you. I didn't know about the guardianship. When I heard, God, Kennedy, he looked at me, his eyes wet. I refused to write the behavioral notes. He said, What? The consultant. She wanted me to add notes to your file saying you were crying at your desk, saying you were aggressive. I told her no. I told her I would sign the performance metrics. But I wouldn't lie about your character. I felt a surge of unexpected gratitude. It wasn't heroism, but it was a shred of decency. So who wrote the affidavits? I asked. I do not know, David said. But Kennedy, the consultant? Her name was not on the staff directory, but I saw her badge. It was a visitor pass. Who was she visiting? Ainsley Voss. David said. I nodded. It tracked. One more thing, David said. He looked around the stairwell, lowering his voice to a whisper. The PIP isn't just about firing you. It is a containment protocol. What does that mean? It locks your user ID, he said. It prevents you from exporting data. But it also creates a litigation hold on your archives. It means nobody can delete your files except legal, or someone pretending to be legal. I said, Exactly. I touched his arm. Thank you. David. He looked at me, miserable and small. Run. Kennedy. Just run. I am not running. I said, I am finishing the audit. I left the stairwell and exited the building through the loading dock. I had what I needed. The PIP was a weaponized administrative tool, designed to freeze me in place while they dissected my life. I met Walter at 4 o'clock. We met at a bus stop 3 miles from the station. A neutral ground. He wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a man in blue coveralls, holding a mop bucket that looked empty. This is Elias, Walter said. He works the night shift at Ridgeway. Elias was young, nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. You are the lady, Elias said. The one Walter said is in the grinder. I said, tell her what you saw. Elias, Walter prompted. Elias looked at his boots. Tuesday night, not this Tuesday, the one before, about midnight, I was waxing the floors near the lockers. And? Saw a suit, Elias said. High-end, looked out of place. He was messing with the lockers. Did he pay? I asked. Nah, Elias said. That is the thing. Usually, you gotta put cash in or use a card to get the code. This guy, he had a key, a skeleton key, opened 3 lockers, put envelopes in 'em, locked 'em back up. Did you see his face? No, he had his back to me, but I saw the flash. The flash? Something on his tie. Elias said, shiny, silver, caught the light when he moved. The tie clip. I said, the scales of justice. Walter nodded. It connects the locations. The same man who visited your neighbor visited the lockers. But who has a master key to the station lockers? I asked. North Barrow Protection. Elias said, they service the security for the transit authority. They got keys to everything. The cameras, the doors, the lockers. I felt the pieces click together like the tumbler of a lock. North Barrow Protection. The vendor I had flagged. They provided security for Marrow Line. They provided security for the bus station. They provided security for my bank. It wasn't a conspiracy of strangers. It was a conspiracy of access. Ainsley Voss had been funneling money to a shell company that doubled as a security contractor. That contractor had physical access to every location where my life was being dismantled. They didn't need to hack the bank. They had the guards. They didn't need to break into the lockers. They had the keys. They didn't need to stalk me. They just tracked my badge. I looked at Walter. Can we prove it? Elias. Walter said, do you have the shift logs for that night? Elias reached into his coveralls and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I made a copy. I figured Walter might want it. I took the paper. It was a sign-in sheet for the Ridgeway Transit Center security detail. November 14th, 2300 to 700. Officer on duty, J. Kagan. J. Kagan. I bet if we find J. Kagan, I said, we find a silver tie clip. I thanked Elias and watched him walk away. Walter turned to me. You have the who, he said. Now you need the lie. The audio, I said. Elena called me at 5. Her voice was breathless. I got it, she said. Or at least, I got the metadata. How? The clerk, she said. I went back and annoyed him until he printed the full property sheet for the audio file. He thought he was just giving me technical specs, not the content. And? Kennedy. Look at the modification date. She texted me a picture of the document. File name, 091523_subject_incident, wave. Created, September 15th, 2023, 14:30. Created, November 20th, 2023, 9:15. Created, software, Audacity, 3.4.1. I stared at the creation date. September 15th, 2023, 2:30 in the afternoon. Where were you on September 15th at 2:30? Elena asked. I closed my eyes. September, the fall training cycle. I was in the main conference room. I said slowly, mandatory, respect in the workplace training. Are you sure? I am positive. I remember because the air conditioning was broken and we were all sweating. There were 40 people there, and the instructor, Sarah Jenkins, the training coordinator, Kennedy, Elena said, her voice sharp. If you were in a conference room with 40 people, you were not at home having a psychotic break, and you certainly weren't recording it. I hung up and immediately dialed the Marrowline main line again. I asked for Sarah Jenkins. She picked up on the second ring. Sarah? It is Kennedy Stewart. Oh, Kennedy. Her voice went tight. I heard about everything. Sarah, listen to me. I need a favor. A big one. Do you still have the attendance logs for the September 15th training session? I should. Why? I need you to email me a copy. I said, certified if possible. Kennedy. I cannot send internal documents to Sarah. I interrupted her. I am being sued for guardianship. They are claiming I was home screaming at the walls on September 15th. If you do not send me that log, a judge is going to declare me insane on Friday morning. There was a long silence. September 15th? She asked softly. Yes, I remember that day. She said, you sat in the front row. You asked a question about reporting structures. Please, Sarah, I heard the clicking of a mouse. I am sending it to your personal email. She said, if anyone asks, I will say, I clicked the wrong address in the directory. Thank you, I whispered. 1 minute later, the email arrived, a PDF of the sign-in sheet. My signature was there, clear as day. Next to the time, 1400. I had the alibi, but I needed one more thing. I needed to prove the voice on the tape was made of pieces. I went back to the hotel. I opened my laptop and pulled up the index list Elena had given me. 091523_subject_incident, wave. Walter had said the background noise jumped. He had said he heard a chime. I thought about the bus station, the lockers, the announcements. Ding dong. The next bus to Albany is now boarding. If they had recorded me at the bus station, maybe using a parabolic mic, or maybe just standing near me with a phone while I was on a call, they would have picked up that chime. I closed my eyes, replaying the last week. Had I been on the phone at the station? Yes. Tuesday night, I had called my mom while waiting for the bus. I was frustrated. I had raised my voice. "I just want this to be over," I had said. Why won't they just listen to me? Context: they had taken my frustration with a late bus and a bad week, and they had cut it into a suicide note. I opened a new document on my laptop. Exhibit list for respondent. Attendance log. Marrowline Systems. September 15th, 2023. Disproves timeline of alleged incident. Ridgeway Transit Center. Security log. November 14th, 2023. Places North Barrow employee at lockers. Affidavit of Martha Gable. Draft. Proves witness manipulation. Text message. Screenshot. Blue Owl. Proves surveillance and connection to Ainsley Voss. It was a pile of paper, but it was a pile of paper that told a story. I looked at the clock. It was 10 p.m. I had the evidence. I had the witness. I had the lawyer. But as I sat there in the dim light of the hotel room, a new realization washed over me. Colder than the air conditioning, this wasn't just Ainsley stealing money. You didn't set up a guardianship trap this complex just to hide some padded invoices. You needed a lawyer to draft the petition. You needed a doctor to sign the initial evaluation, even a fake one. You needed a security firm to plant the evidence. You needed a banker to look the other way. This was an ecosystem. Ainsley Voss wasn't the mastermind. She was just the client. There was a machine operating beneath the surface of the city. A machine designed to eat people like me. People who asked questions. People who stood in the way of the money flow. They had a template. They had a script. I whispered the words to the empty room. This is rehearsed. They had done this before, probably dozens of times, to other analysts, other whistleblowers, maybe just inconvenient grandmothers with large estates. I wasn't just fighting for my job anymore. I was fighting a factory that manufactured victims. I packed my bag. I put the notebook, the burner phone, and the printed emails into the waterproof pocket. Tomorrow. I was walking into the lion's den. But I wasn't going in as Kennedy Stewart, the victim. I was going in as Kennedy Stewart, the auditor, and I was going to fail them. The fear that kept me awake on Thursday was not about losing the case. Judges made bad rulings every day, and people survived them. The fear that sat on my chest like a bag of wet cement was the stain. In the corporate world, and especially in the small, incestuous world of high-stakes compliance, reputation was not just currency. It was oxygen. You could recover from a firing. You could recover from a bad quarter. But you could not recover from the label unstable. Once that word was attached to your name in a court filing, it followed you. It appeared in background checks. It was whispered at industry conferences. It was the red flag that made hiring managers shred your resume before they even read your qualifications. Even if I won tomorrow, even if I walked out of that courtroom with a dismissal order in my hand, the filing would still exist. In the matter of the application for guardianship of Kennedy E. Stewart, I sat on the floor of my hotel room. Surrounded by paper, I was building a binder. I bought a 3-ring binder from an office supply store. Black, heavy-duty, 2 inches thick. I bought tab dividers. I bought page protectors. I treated the assembly of this binder with the same religious attention to detail I applied to my audits. Tab 1. Timeline. A chronological list of every anomaly, from the first badge error to the lock change. Tab 2. Identity theft. The bank preservation order number. The credit inquiry from the law firm. The affidavit from the bank manager confirming the ID used was not mine. Tab 3. Surveillance. The photo of the text message mentioning the Blue Owl. The email thread proving I set the trap. Tab 4. Financial motive. The invoices linking Marrowline to Viridian Risk Consulting to North Barrow Protection. It was clean. It was factual. It was boring. That was the point. Crazy people were exciting. Crazy people had manifestos and sprawling theories written in red ink. Sane people had indexes and cross-references. My phone buzzed. It was the burner. Can we talk? Coffee shop on 5th. 10 minutes. I just want to clear the air. Ainsley. I stared at the screen. Ainsley Voss wanted to meet. It was a risk. My lawyer, Elena, would tell me not to go. She would tell me that meeting the opposing party without counsel was a tactical error. But I wasn't thinking like a defendant anymore. I was thinking like an investigator. And investigators knew that when the subject wanted to talk. You let them talk. I put on my coat. I checked the battery on my digital voice recorder, a dedicated device I had bought that morning, distinct from my phone. I walked to the coffee shop. It was a hipster place with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. Ainsley was sitting at a corner table. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored cashmere sweater and pearl earrings. She looked like the kind of woman who baked cookies for the office charity drive. When she saw me, her face softened into an expression of profound, pitying concern. "Kennedy," she said, half rising, "you look tired." I sat down opposite her. I did not take off my coat. I placed the voice recorder on the table between us. I pressed the red button. The light blinked once. "Ainsley," I said, my voice steady, "before we start, I am recording this conversation for my personal records. Do you consent to being recorded?" Ainsley blinked. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, brighter than before. "Of course, Kennedy," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "If that makes you feel safer, I have nothing to hide. I just want to help." She leaned forward, clasping her hands around her tea mug. "We are all so worried about you," she said. "David, the team, when we heard about the filing, we were heartbroken. You are the one paying for the filing." "Ainsley," I said. She shook her head, a gentle, corrective motion. "Oh, honey, no. I know you think there is some big conspiracy. That is part of the illness. That is why we want you to get help." I stared at her. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. She wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She was treating me like a confused child. "I know the audit was stressful," she continued, "and I know you felt persecuted. But Kennedy, inventing stories about shell companies and security guards? It is not healthy. I didn't invent the payments to Viridian." I said. Ainsley sighed. "Viridian is a standard consulting partner. You are seeing patterns where there are none. Just like you saw. What was it? A blue owl?" She smiled sadly. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. Silence was uncomfortable. People rushed to fill it. "Kennedy, look," she said, lowering her voice. "We want this to end quietly. We want you to get the care you need. You do not need to go through a public hearing. You do not need to drag this out." "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "Just step back," she said. "Let the guardianship happen. It is temporary. Just for 6 months. Let us stabilize your finances. Let us handle the stress. You can rest, I repeated. "In a facility of your choosing? Somewhere safe," she said. "Somewhere you cannot hurt yourself, or anyone else." She took a sip of her tea. "I know you are scared," she said. "I know you feel like you are losing control, but we are trying to catch you. When you were at the bus station on Tuesday..." She paused. I waited. I hadn't mentioned the bus station to anyone at work. "When you were at the bus station," she continued, smoothing her hair. "You seemed so lost, wandering around those lockers. I felt a jolt of adrenaline." "Which lockers?" I asked. "The ones in the terminal." She said easily, "Locker 17C, right? The security report said you were standing in front of it for 10 minutes. My stomach dropped. But my face remained stone. "I never told anyone the locker number." "Ainsley." She froze. The teacup stopped halfway to her mouth. "The security report from the station." I said, "Why would Maroline have a security report from a public transit center? Unless the same company runs both." Ainsley set the cup down. The china clattered against the saucer. The warmth evaporated from her eyes, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. "You are confused," she said sharply. "You mentioned the number. In your emails." "No." I said. I checked my sent folder. "I never mentioned it." She glared at me. The mask of the concerned friend was slipping. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice hard. "You are sick, Kennedy, and tomorrow, a judge is going to agree. And when he does, I will be the one approving your visitor list. She stood up, throwing a $20 bill on the table. Enjoy the coffee, she said. I waited until she was out the door. Then I stopped the recording. Locker 17C. She knew the number, and she had admitted to seeing a security report. That linked her directly to North Barrow Protection. It linked her to the surveillance. I put the recorder in my pocket and walked out. I felt a grim satisfaction. She had tried to play the mother hen, but she had stepped right into the fox trap. I went back to the hotel to meet Elena. She was sitting in the lobby, looking at a document on her tablet. You shouldn't have met her, Elena said without looking up. I got her on tape. I said, she knew the locker number. She admitted seeing a security report from the bus station. Elena looked up then. Her eyes widened. She admitted it? She slipped. I said, but it is on the recording. Elena nodded slowly. That is good. It establishes a nexus between the petitioner and the surveillance. It proves they are tracking you outside of work hours. She tapped her tablet. But they are moving on other fronts too. She said, check your email. The real one. I pulled out my laptop and logged in. There was an email from Marrowline HR. Subject, severance proposal and compassionate release. I opened the attachment. It was a legal agreement. Marrowline Systems agrees to pay Kennedy Stewart the sum of $50,000. I raised my eyebrows. $50,000. That was 6 months of salary, in exchange for her voluntary resignation and withdrawal of any and all contest to the protective filing. I scrolled down. Ms. Stewart acknowledges that she is suffering from a temporary medical condition that limits her capacity to work. She agrees to enter a strict non-disclosure agreement regarding all internal processes, audits, and vendor relationships, and there it was. The mutual non-disparagement clause. Neither party shall make any negative statements about the other. Ms. Stewart specifically agrees not to discuss her employment or the reasons for her departure with any third party, government agency, or media outlet. It is a bribe. I said, it is a trap. Elena corrected. Look at the wording. Acknowledges she is suffering from a medical condition. If you sign this, you are admitting to the very thing they are accusing you of. You are signing your own diagnosis. They can waive this in court and say, look, she admits she is unfit. We are just trying to help her. It is framed as kindness. I said, compassionate release. They are scared. Elena said, they know you have the attendance logs. They know their timeline is crumbling. They want to buy you out before the hearing. I hit reply. I typed 2 words. Offer declined. Then I opened a new tab. I went to the website of the Hollowbrook Labor Integrity Office. It was the state agency responsible for investigating corporate retaliation and whistleblower complaints. I had hesitated to do this before. Filing a formal complaint was the nuclear option. It made everything public. It burned the bridge with Marrowline forever. But the bridge was already burning. I was just standing in the smoke. I filled out the intake form. Complainant. Kennedy Stewart. Employer. Marrowline Systems. Nature of complaint. Retaliation for protected activity. Falsification of personnel records. Fraudulent legal process. In the narrative section, I wrote a summary. I didn't ramble. I used bullet points. I described the audit findings. I described the PIP. I described the missing emails. I described the guardianship petition as a retaliatory tactic to silence a compliance officer. I attached the timeline I had built for the binder. I attached the email regarding the Blue Owl trap. I hit submit. A confirmation number appeared on the screen. HLIO-2023-11-0491. I took a screenshot. Now, I said to Elena, we are not just fighting a guardianship, we are litigating a whistleblower retaliation case. If they fire me or pursue the guardianship now, it looks like punishment for the complaint. It changes the incentives. Elena agreed. The judge in family court might not care about corporate fraud, but he will care about federal whistleblower protections. It gives him a reason to pause. I felt a lightness in my chest. I had fired back, but the war wasn't over. I hadn't heard from Walter in 2 days. I had sent 3 texts to the number he had used. No reply. I had gone to the diner. He wasn't there. A cold dread started to creep in. Walter was my guide. He was the only one who knew the mechanics of the trap. If they had gotten to him, I went back to the bus station on Thursday evening. I found Elias, the janitor with the mop. "Have you seen him?" I asked. Elias looked nervous. He kept checking the corridor. "He was here last night." Elias whispered, "But he left fast. Said he saw the suit again." "The tie-clip man?" "Yeah. Walter said the guy was following him, waiting by the exit. Walter told me if you came looking, to tell you he is going dark. Said he didn't want to lead them to you. He is protecting me." I said, "He left this for you." Elias said. He reached into his pocket and handed me a plastic card. It was a key card. "What is this?" "It is for the luggage storage room," Elias said. "In the basement. Walter said if you need a place to think where there are no cameras, go there. Room B4. I took the card. "Thank you." "Elias, I didn't go to the basement. I went back to the hotel. I needed to prepare for the hearing. But when I got to my room door, there was a package leaning against the frame. It was a padded envelope, no return address, just my name. Written in block letters. I froze. How did they know I was at this hotel? I had paid cash. I hadn't used my real name at check-in. Then I looked at the hallway ceiling, a small dome camera. Of course, North Barrow protection. They probably had facial recognition running on half the cameras in the city. If they had access to the hotel's feed, they found me the moment I walked in. I picked up the package. It felt light. I went inside, locked the door, and engaged the deadbolt. I cut the envelope open with a pen. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a printout from a medical portal, my medical portal, the one from my gynecologist's office. It wasn't a medical record. It was a login history log. User, K. Stewart. Login attempt, November 15th, 2023. Failed. Login attempt, November 16th, 2023. Failed. Password reset. Request, November 16th, 2023. At the bottom of the page, someone had typed a message. "We know about the prescription from 2018. Do you want the judge to know?" I stopped breathing. In 2018, my father had died. I had gone through a period of intense grief. My doctor had prescribed a mild anti-anxiety medication for 3 months. I had taken it, processed my grief, and stopped. It was a normal, human reaction to loss. But in the hands of Creston Hale, in a hearing about my mental fitness, they would spin it. They would say I had a history of chemical dependency. They would say I had a long-standing psychiatric condition. They were threatening to humiliate me, to drag my grief into the public record and twist it into madness. My hands started to shake. Violent, uncontrollable tremors. I dropped the paper. I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping my arms around myself. "We choose your doctors." They were everywhere. They were in my bank, in my email, in my doctor's office. There was no privacy. There was no safety. I felt a sob rising in my throat. Maybe I should take the $50,000. Maybe I should just sign the paper and disappear. Move to a different state. Change my name. Start over. I looked at the burner phone. I could call Ainsley right now. I could surrender. Then I looked at the binder. I looked at the timeline. I looked at the email from Sarah Jenkins. If I quit now, everything they said about me became true. I became the unstable woman who couldn't handle the pressure. I became the liability. And Ainsley Voss would keep stealing. And North Barrow Protection would keep selling keys to lockers. And Walter Brigg would be right. The system was rigged. I stopped shaking. Fear was fuel. That was what my father used to say. Fear is just energy without a place to go. Give it a job. I picked up the paper. I folded it and punched holes in the side. I opened the binder. I added a new tab. Tab 5. Intimidation. I filed the threat. They wanted to use my medical history? Fine. Let them bring it up. I would bring up the fact that they had illegally accessed a HIPAA-protected database to get it. My phone rang. It was Elena. Kennedy. She said, Her voice was tight with excitement. "The expert came through? The audio?" I asked. He analyzed the waveform. She said, "It is clumsy work. He found 6 distinct edit points. The noise floor drops to 0 between sentences. That means they cut the silence out. And the background noise? He isolated the frequencies. There is a low-frequency hum consistent with a large HVAC system, like a public terminal." "And Kennedy?" "Yeah?" "He found the chime. My heart leaped. It is faint," Elena said. "It is buried under your voice, but he used a spectral filter. It is a 3-note ascending chime. DFA. The Ridgeway chime." I said. We cross-referenced it. Elena said, "It matches the announcement chime used by the Hollowbrook Transit Authority. It does not match anything in a residential apartment. So we have proof." I said. "Proof they recorded me in public and claimed it was in my home. We have proof of perjury." Elena said, "If they introduce that tape tomorrow, we can impeach it. We can prove it is fabricated evidence." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was relief. Pure, white-hot relief. "I am ready." "Elena," I said, "get some sleep." She said, "Tomorrow is going to be a bloodbath. But at least now we have a sword." I hung up. I didn't sleep. I took my keys and went out to my car, parked in the dark corner of the hotel lot. I sat in the driver's seat, the binder on the passenger seat next to me. The windows were cold. The streetlights cast long, skeletal shadows across the dashboard. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. My skin was pale, and there were dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a woman who had been hunted for a week, but my eyes were steady. I practiced. "My name is Kennedy Stewart." My voice sounded thin in the cold car. I tried again, lower, from the diaphragm. "My name is Kennedy Stewart. I am a senior compliance analyst at Merrowline Systems. I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am the victim of a coordinated fraud. I rehearsed the answers to the questions I knew they would ask. Ms. Stewart, isn't it true you were placed on a performance improvement plan?" "Yes. That plan was initiated 2 days after I flagged a discrepancy in the North Barrow account." "Ms. Stewart, have you been experiencing paranoia?" "I have been experiencing surveillance." "There is a difference." "Ms. Stewart, why did you buy a burner phone?" "Because my primary phone was compromised by the same entity that accessed my bank account. I spoke to the empty car. I spoke to the steering wheel. I spoke to the ghosts of every doubt I had felt in the last 4 days. I stripped the emotion out of my voice. I sanded down the anger until it was smooth and hard. I could not cry in that courtroom. I could not shout. I had to be a stone. The old man's whisper came back to me one last time. "Check your name before Friday." It was Friday tomorrow. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. 11:59. The numbers flipped. 12 o'clock. Friday. I put my hand on the binder. I was still here. I was still Kennedy Stewart, and I was ready to take my life back. Courtroom 4B was smaller than I expected. It was a windowless box of pale wood and fluorescent light, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. There was no gallery full of spectators, no dramatic music swelling in the background. There was just a clerk typing on a silent keyboard, a court reporter adjusting her stenograph, and a judge who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Judge Holloway was a man in his 60s with reading glasses perched precariously on the end of his nose. He flipped through the thick file in front of him with a heavy, rhythmic sighing that sounded like a clock ticking down the seconds of my life. I sat at the defendant's table. My hands were folded on top of my black binder. Beneath the table, my knees were bouncing with a nervous energy I could barely contain. My throat felt tight, as if a hand were gently squeezing my windpipe. Elena Marwick sat beside me. She looked calm, dangerous, and entirely in her element. She touched my elbow lightly. "Breathe," she whispered without looking at me. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. I forced myself to inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Across the aisle, the table for the petitioner was occupied by a man I had never met, Arthur Sterling. the lead litigator for the Creston Hale Group. He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my car. He had silver hair, a tan that suggested weekends on a boat, and a demeanor of sorrowful professional obligation. Next to him sat Ainsley Voss. She was wearing a simple gray dress and a cardigan. She looked small, fragile, and deeply concerned. She didn't look at me. She stared at her hands, playing the role of the reluctant friend forced to intervene. "All rise," the bailiff droned. Judge Holloway looked over his glasses. "We are here in the matter of the application for guardianship of Kennedy Stewart," he said. "Mr. Sterling, this is your motion. Proceed." Sterling stood up. He didn't stride around the room. He stood behind his table, leaning forward on his knuckles, his voice low and intimate, as if he were sharing a tragic secret with the judge. "Your Honor," he began, "this is not a filing we make lightly. In fact, it is a filing we make with a heavy heart. Ms. Stewart is a brilliant woman, a talented analyst, but over the last 6 months, we have watched a tragic, precipitous decline in her cognitive faculties." He paused, letting the silence do the work. "We have submitted affidavits from neighbors who fear for their safety." He continued, "We have submitted evidence of paranoid outbursts in the workplace. We have evidence of financial mismanagement so severe that her own bank had to lock her accounts for fraud." I dug my fingernails into my palms. It was so smooth. He took the very crimes committed against me, the bank lock, the surveillance, and used them as proof of my incompetence. "Ms. Stewart believes she is the victim of a conspiracy," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She believes her employer, a respected compliance firm, is plotting against her. She believes she is being followed." "Your Honor, these are not the thoughts of a well woman. These are the symptoms of a break. We are simply asking for the court to step in, to appoint a guardian to manage her affairs, and to ensure she gets the medical treatment she so clearly needs." He sat down. It was masterful. He hadn't called me crazy. He had called me unwell. He had stripped me of my agency and replaced it with pity. Judge Holloway turned his gaze to me. "Ms. Marwick?" he asked. Elena stood up. She didn't lean. She stood straight, her spine like a steel rod. "Your Honor," she said, her voice crisp, "the petitioner paints a picture of a woman in decline. We intend to paint a different picture. A picture of a woman who discovered financial irregularities at her company and was systematically targeted to silence her." The judge raised an eyebrow. "That is a serious allegation. Counselor, this is a family court, not a criminal tribunal. We understand that." "Your Honor," Elena said, "but the premise of this petition is that Ms. Stewart is delusional. If we can prove that the conspiracies she sees are real, then she is not delusional. She is observant, and if she is observant, she is competent. Proceed," the judge said. Leaning back, Elena opened her file. "First, the matter of notice," she said. "The petitioner claims they tried to serve Ms. Stewart repeatedly. We have here a log from the court clerk showing that an address change was filed on October 19th. She held up a document. "Ms. Stewart did not file this change," Elena said. "It was filed by a third-party service often used by bulk debt collectors. Because of this change, Ms. Stewart never received notice of these proceedings until 3 days ago. This is a classic sewer service tactic. Your Honor, it is designed to secure a default judgment against a respondent who doesn't know she is being sued." Sterling stood up halfway. "Objection. Administrative error is not proof of malice." "Overruled," the judge said. He looked at the document. "Continue." Elena turned to me. I opened the binder to tab 1. I handed her the first exhibit. "Your Honor," Elena said, "the petitioner has submitted Exhibit C. An audio recording they claim was made on September 15th, capturing Miss Stewart in a manic state inside her apartment." The judge nodded. "I have reviewed the transcript. It is disturbing. We would like to play the audio." "Your Honor," Elena said, "but we would like to play it with a spectral analysis filter applied." Sterling stiffened. "Your Honor, we object to any manipulation of the evidence." "It is not a manipulation," Elena said calmly. It is an enhancement. Our expert has isolated the background frequencies. Allowed, the judge said. Elena pressed a button on her laptop, which was connected to the courtroom speakers. The audio began. It was my voice, shrill and panicked. I just want this to be over. Why won't they just listen to me? It sounded horrible. I sounded unhinged. Elena paused the track. Your Honor, she said, please listen to the background. She played it again, but this time, she boosted the lower frequencies. Beneath my voice, there was a low hum, and then, faintly but clearly, a 3-note chime. Ding dong. The judge frowned. What is that? That, Your Honor, is the announcement chime for the Hollowbrook Transit Authority. Elena said, It plays before station announcements. She picked up a piece of paper. We have here a certified affidavit from the Transit Authority confirming that this specific chime sequence is used only in their terminals. It does not occur in residential apartment buildings. She picked up another paper. And here, Your Honor, is the attendance log for Marrow Line Systems for September 15th. It shows that at the time this recording was allegedly made in Ms. Stewart's home, she was physically present in a mandatory training session with 40 other employees. The courtroom was silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. So, Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, if the recording has a bus station chime in the background, and Ms. Stewart was at work, then this recording was not made in her home. It was spliced together from snippets recorded in public, likely without her consent, and assembled to sound like a breakdown. Judge Holloway looked at Sterling. Mr. Sterling? Explanation? Sterling looked unruffled, but his fingers were twitching against his thigh. Your Honor, the date on the file might be a metadata error. The substance of the outburst remains. The substance is fabricated. Elena cut in. It is a digital collage, and submitting fabricated evidence to this court is a felony. The judge's face hardened. He looked at the file in front of him with new suspicion. Move on. Ms. Marwick, he said. What else? Identity theft, Elena said. She pointed to the back of the courtroom. We call Mr. Robert Vance, manager of the Hollowbrook branch of First Sovereign Bank. Robert stood up. He looked terrified. He walked to the witness stand. Clutching his briefcase, he was sworn in. Mr. Vance, Elena said, on Tuesday, November 21st, was an authorized user added to Miss Stewart's account? Yes, Robert said, his voice shaky. And was this done in person? Yes. Did you verify the identification of the person requesting the addition? Yes. We scanned a driver's license. Elena walked to the table and picked up a blown-up image. This is the scan from your system, she said. She placed it on the projector. It showed a license with my name, my address, and a photo that looked very much like me, but not exactly. Mr. Vance, Elena said, what is the eye color listed on this license? Brown, Robert read. And the height? 5'4"? Elena turned to me. Ms. Stewart, please stand. I stood up. Your Honor, Elena said. Ms. Stewart's eyes are green, and she is 5'8". She handed the judge my actual license. The person who walked into that bank was not Kennedy Stewart. Elena said it was an imposter using a high-quality forgery. And yet, this mistake was used by the petitioner to freeze Ms. Stewart's assets and claim she was mismanaging her funds. The judge looked from the scan to me, and then to Sterling. Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice cold. You cited this bank freeze in your opening statement as proof of the respondent's incompetence. It appears to be proof of identity theft. Sterling stood up. Your Honor, my client relied on the bank's report. If the bank was deceived, your client seems to be benefiting remarkably from these deceptions. The judge snapped. Sit down. Elena wasn't done. Your Honor, she said, the petitioner claims to be acting out of concern. They claim they are trying to protect Ms. Stewart, but we have evidence that the petitioner has been actively surveilling Ms. Stewart and threatening her. She held up the small digital recorder. I object, Sterling shouted. This is a surprise exhibit. It was obtained yesterday. Elena said. It is rebuttal evidence, and under the one-party consent laws of this state, it is admissible. The judge waved his hand. Play it. Elena pressed play. The sound of the coffee shop filled the room, the clatter of cups, and then Ainsley's voice, warm, maternal. When you were at the bus station, wandering around those lockers. Which lockers? My voice asked on the tape. Locker 17C, right? The security report said you were standing in front of it. Elena stopped the tape. She turned to face Ainsley Voss. Ms. Voss, Elena said. Ainsley didn't look up. She was staring at the table, her face pale. Ms. Voss, you stated on this recording that you saw a security report detailing Ms. Stewart's movements at the Ridgeway Transit Center, specifically mentioning Locker 17C. Sterling stood up. Your Honor. Ms. Voss is not on the witness list. I am calling her as a hostile witness. Elena said. Right now. The judge nodded. Ms. Voss, take the stand. Ainsley stood up. She smoothed her dress. She walked to the stand with a surprising amount of poise, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She sat down. Ms. Voss, Elena asked. You work in vendor relations at Marrowline, correct? Correct, Ainsley said. Her voice was ice. Do you have access to the security logs of the Ridgeway Transit Center? No. Then how did you see a report placing Ms. Stewart at Locker 17C? Ainsley hesitated. She licked her lips. It was sent to me, by a concerned party. Who? I do not recall. You do not recall who sent you a surveillance report on your employee? Elena pressed. We received many reports, Ainsley said. Let me help your memory, Elena said. She pulled out the invoice I had audited, the one I had reconstructed from memory, and the data scraps Walter had helped me find. Does Marrowline Systems contract with a company called North Barrow Protection? Yes, Ainsley said. They are our building security vendor. And does North Barrow Protection also hold the contract for the Ridgeway Transit Center? I believe so. And does Marrowline pay invoices to a company called Viridian Risk Consulting? Ainsley's eyes flickered to Sterling. He gave a microscopic shake of his head. I'm not sure. Ainsley said, That is a finance question. Elena pulled out the state registry document. I have here a filing showing that Viridian Risk Consulting shares a registered address with North Barrow Protection, and coincidentally, with the mail drop used by the Creston Hale Group. Elena walked closer to the stand. Ms. Voss, isn't it true that you approved payments to Viridian, which were then used to hire private investigators to follow Ms. Stewart? Objection, Sterling yelled. Speculation. Isn't it true, Elena continued, her voice rising, that you knew the locker number because the man who followed Ms. Stewart, the man with the silver tie clip, works for the same company you are paying with Marrowline funds? I was trying to help her. Ainsley snapped. The room went silent. Ainsley's eyes widened. She realized she had cracked. Help her how? Elena asked softly. By breaking into a locker? By forging her medical records? By paying a lawyer to strip her of her civil rights? Ainsley looked at the judge. She looked at me. The mask of the concerned friend was gone. Beneath it was just a bureaucrat who had been caught. She was unstable. Ainsley hissed. She was asking questions that were none of her business. She was going to ruin the contract. We had to contain the risk. Contain the risk, the judge repeated. He looked at Ainsley with an expression of pure disgust. You are not describing a human being, Ms. Voss. You are describing a liability. He banged his gavel. I have heard enough. The judge turned to Sterling. Petition denied, he said, dismissed with prejudice. He didn't stop there. Furthermore, he said, his voice booming in the small room, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for an immediate investigation into fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. Mr. Sterling, you will remain in this courtroom while the bailiff contacts the Bar Association. I want to know exactly how much of this evidence your firm manufactured. Sterling slumped in his chair. He looked suddenly very old. Ainsley Voss sat in the witness box, frozen. The judge looked at me. Ms. Stewart, he said. His voice was softer now. The court apologizes. You are free to go, and I will be issuing an order unsealing all records of this proceeding so that you may use them in your continued efforts to clear your name. Thank you, Your Honor, I whispered. The gavel banged one last time. It was over. Elena let out a long breath and slumped back in her chair. We did it, she said. I looked at the binder in front of me. The tabs, the logs, the timeline. It was just paper, but it was the shield that had saved my life. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but not from fear, from the adrenaline crash. I walked past the petitioner's table. Ainsley wouldn't look at me. Sterling was frantically typing on his phone. I walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. I expected to feel triumphant. I expected to feel like the hero in a movie who walks out into the sunlight while the credits roll. But the hallway was just a hallway. People were milling around, lawyers, defendants, clerks. As I walked toward the elevators, I heard the whispers. That is her. A woman in a suit murmured to her colleague, the one who sued her own boss. I heard she had a breakdown. The colleague whispered back, No, she won. The woman said, But still, where there is smoke. I kept walking. I kept my head high. They were right. There was smoke. The stain of the accusation would never fully wash out. When people Googled my name, they would see the court filings. They would see the words guardianship and incapacity. Even with the dismissal, the question mark would always hang over my head. Is she stable? Is she trouble? But as I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out onto the courthouse steps, I took a deep breath of the cold November air. It smelled of exhaust and rain and city grit. It smelled real. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I wasn't a file number. I wasn't a ward of the state. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. I dialed a number I had memorized. Walter? I said when the line clicked open. You won. The old man's voice rasped. I heard it on the scanner. We won. I said, Not we. Walter said, You. I just pointed at the road. You drove the car. Where are you? I asked. Gone, Walter said. North Barrow knows I helped you. I am going to visit my sister in Oregon for a while. Keep my head down. Will I see you again? Maybe, he said, if you ever need to pay for a bus ticket. The line went dead. I looked down at the street. A bus was pulling away from the curb, its diesel engine roaring. I had lost my job. I had lost my sense of safety. I had lost the illusion that the systems of the world were designed to protect me, but I had found something else. I had found the ability to look at the machinery of power and see the gears. I knew how they worked now. I knew how to jam them. I buttoned my coat. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking on the concrete. I had a whistleblower complaint to follow up on. I had a civil suit to file against Marrowline. I had a life to rebuild. The whispers followed me, faint and scratching like dry leaves. Let them whisper. I was Kennedy Stewart, and I was the woman who filed back. Thank you so much for listening to The Paper Death of Kennedy Stewart. It is a terrifying thought, isn't it? That your entire life, your freedom, your sanity, your identity, can be dismantled by a few pieces of paper and a well-dressed lawyer. We like to think we are safe, but Kennedy's story reminds us that the line between a citizen and a ghost is thinner than we think. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you in a bustling city like Kennedy? Or somewhere quiet? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of revenge, justice, and the dark side of human nature, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. It helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you these realistic, gritty dramas. Share your thoughts on Kennedy's strategy. Would you have signed the NDA and taken the money? Or would you have fought? Let me know in English in the comments. Until next time, check your bank accounts, check your mail, and trust your gut. Stay safe.